So good evening, everybody. Thank you. This is an awesome group to see turned out today, and I am so excited to talk to you about this. I know some of you have heard me speak before, so I ask you to forgive me if I use the same joke. I've only got so many in my repertoire, so please laugh again. I appreciated it a lot the first time. But for those of you who are new or who haven't met me or worked with me before, my name is Jennifer Lazlo, and I work for the Office of Emergency Services with the City of Berkeley. I am also debuting the new logo today in our new polo shirts, so this is super exciting. My boss, Assistant Chief Brannigan, went, whoa, when he saw that we're actually going out to the public with these, so we're pretty excited. My job day to day is I'm an emergency services coordinator with the city. I work out of the fire department. They do not let me put out any fires, which is a very good thing. No water on the red stuff. But what I do is the background planning. And my major focus area are making sure that the people who may have specific reasons why our general services won't work for them are going to be able to get what they need and are going to be able to access disaster preparedness in the city of Berkeley, which is why I'm here today to do this presentation. I also work with a lot of organizations in the city. So I'm sort of managing might be overstating it, but coordinating the new Community Resilience Center program, which we're just starting up, which is essentially a version of the Neighborhood Cash program, which I believe all of you are very familiar with, that's going with our community organizations in vulnerable neighborhoods that haven't been served as much by the neighborhood caches. So we're hoping, what you're gonna see today is a little bit of how these two programs might work together and how we might be able to talk to each other more effectively. But we're also gonna talk a little bit about the basics. So I ask you to forgive me for those of you who are the experts in the room, which are many of you, that we're going to go over some of the stuff that you might have heard before. Hopefully I'll add a little bit of context and interest that might be a new tidbit, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page, especially because they've done such wonderful advertising to bring in community members. So thank you all for being here today. I've said who I am. I work directly with Kin. Dave is all of our boss, and I also work with Sarah Lana. She does most of the internal city plans. So you see her here when the mitigations plan is coming up for review. She does a lot of that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Here's my plan for the day. Who are we in Berkeley? Sometimes it can be a little bit surprising. What exactly are we expecting to have happen here, and what can we do? When I'm using the big one in this context, I'm not necessarily just talking about an earthquake. We talk a lot about earthquakes here in Berkeley for a very good reason, but it's not the only big one that we could actually have in this region. Getting connected both with the city and with each other. Then we're going to talk about neighborhood groups and apartment buildings and how the two can meet and work with each other and be effective, and the work I've been doing with some of the apartment buildings here in the city. And then finally, and I think probably most importantly, we'll do a question and answer session. I tried to cover the basics, but what I'm really looking forward to is actually talking with you and hearing from you on what's working well and what we need to do. So that's where I'm going to focus. We won't spend too terribly long on my presentation. We'll have a lot of time to talk. So I know what brought you here today. All right, here's the really boring census data that I just looked up. 115,688, that's the 2014 number for those of you who are census geeks. I went to grad school in disaster science and management, so I had to become a census geek so I could look at all of this data. So we're up from 112, which is what you'll see on the city website. That was our 2010 census number.
Including the university.
Including the university students who aren't claimed by their parents. Some of them are, some of them aren't. It sort of depends. It's probably one of the fuzziest numbers that's out there is when we've got a big university in town. We put them at about 30,000-ish of the city as people affiliated with UC Berkeley. Of that number, about 15,000 are over the age of 65. So that's a pretty good chunk right there. And about 4.8% have a disability and are under the age of 65. So census numbers are weird. This is some of their categories of how they do things. But the main point of that is here in Berkeley, we are actually pretty much one of the birth grounds of the disability rights movement in the United States. We had the first curb cut. If you haven't appreciated this, I found this plaque the other day and I jumped up and down in excitement. The first curb cut is right next to the downtown Berkeley BART station, the big circular entrance across the street. You can see it. There's a really wonderful plaque right next to the big tall building that's right there. So Berkeley has been a central point in that throughout the city. We also have a lot of awesome people who have lived here for 50 and 60 years, who really know Berkeley, who know all about it, who have been here through all its many, many colorful days, and continue to reside here. And as you age, and I'm going to say, first of all, I know I'm young, and I apologize for that, and I'm going to try to be as good about my language as I can. So if I say something wrong, please forgive me, first of all. But secondly, we change. I thought that changes didn't happen in your late 20s, early 30s, and I'm being surprised by that right now. So different things happen throughout the aging process, and I'm going to address a few of those specifically, and then if we have any other specific questions about things, I'm happy to address them. Another interesting thing to know, did you know there are 46,000 housing units in the city of Berkeley? That was actually news to me today. I thought that was an interesting number. And of those 46,000, about 19,000 are occupied by the owner. The other 27,000 are occupied by renters. Okay, so we have a huge rental population here in Berkeley. And renter populations tend to be super transient in that they don't necessarily stay in the same place for long. So those are some of just our base facts as why I'm bothering to talk to you about these topics. So we're just starting there. Now, Berkeley, lovely, lovely Berkeley. What are our hazards? What have we got? You're going to see I'm going to start using some of the new exciting language. Just so you know, tax dollars did not pay for this logo. It's actually, we got all of this new logo stuff from our partnership with the 100 Resilient Cities, the Rockefeller Foundation that they're doing. They actually are partnering us with different organizations that can do things like make a new logo so that all of the Berkeley preparedness programs fall under one big umbrella. And you actually know where to find information. I was telling people, I know right now, if you want to find out if you live in a soft story apartment building, it's on one website. If you want to find out how to join a neighborhood watch group, it's on another website. If you want to know what public health says you should do during a flu epidemic, it's on another website. And then you've got the Office of Emergency Services website. We're starting to bring these things together so you can find everything when you need to find it. We know the website's not the prettiest. I'm working on it. I can't promise pretty. I can probably promise organized, though, which we have not accomplished up to this point. So that's the big goal. So what have we got in Berkeley? We can start with the inevitable big one, which is the earthquake. So that's our map on the left here. The red is the fault zone. We all sort of just, one of the things, I have a really good friend in the emergency management community who was explaining to his daughter the other day, see those hills? Those are made by earthquakes many years ago. And that's generally the rule, right? As we look around the Bay Area, if there's a hill, there's an earthquake underneath it. Okay, that's not quite accurate. Don't tell the geologists. They would wince at that particular description. But our Hayward Fault here runs under the Coliseum and along the hills within Berkeley. And that is really the big fault that affects the Berkeley area. We've got the San Andreas Fault that also goes up through Santa Cruz, up through San Francisco, joins back up. That weird little stretch of land, that's all from the San Andreas Fault. The way I like to think of those two faults is who's going to be helping whom. If it's a Hayward Fault that goes, San Francisco gets to come help us. If it's the San Andreas Fault that goes, we get to go help them. So we know we'll feel it either way. But how strongly we're going to feel it and how we're going to be affected depends on which fault goes. And then there's these tiny little faults, like in Napa, which caused a huge amount of damage and would have been hugely consequential if it had happened 8 hours earlier, when there were 40,000 people at a wine festival and out in the streets of downtown Napa. But it happened at night. And so all of the bricks that fell down, all of the buildings that partially collapsed only killed one person in that earthquake. And we'll actually talk about that one person in a minute. So we know our earthquakes. We also, just for your information, the sort of blue, that squiggly line that comes out through Berkeley, that is the liquefaction area. However, it's a little bit of a misleading map. It's one of the ones that we really need to get fixed. What it is all of the liquefaction area, there are actually 2 zones. One zone is liquefaction during like 80% of earthquakes, one's during 10% of earthquakes. So if you are bayside of the train tracks, you are in a high risk liquefaction area. If you are mountainside, hillside of the train tracks, it's a much lower risk of liquefaction. So don't freak out from that map. Okay, that's just sort of a big thing. And in general, in Berkeley, the train tracks are a really big divider. That's also the tsunami zone in Berkeley. If you're hillside of the train tracks, you don't need to worry about tsunamis. And quick note, since we're not going to talk about tsunamis any more than this, tsunamis are not going to get tsunamis from earthquakes we feel here. That's not the kind of earthquakes we have, no matter what the movie San Andreas told you. It was very dramatic, very exciting. There are no waves going crashing across the Golden Gate Bridge, not going to happen. They can't get that high. They actually say the highest tsunami we could possibly get in the Bay Area will not come to the top of the concrete pylons that the bottom of the bridge is attached to. And that's the highest one. And those would be from earthquakes in Alaska, in Japan, around the Ring of Fire, where we'd have 4, 6, 8 hours of warning, and we would be out there with loudspeakers making everyone leave the marina. So that's sort of just for realistically, that's generally what our tsunami threat is. We don't have near shore. That's what the ones, like what happened in Japan, we don't have that kind of tsunami threat here. Okay, cool. Sorry, had to do a little tsunami aside there. And then the brown areas on this are our landslide zone. And those landslides can be triggered by rain. They can be triggered by seismic activity. They can be triggered by the land just not liking you that day. And so we know that that is another, in our hills, that is a potential danger that we have. All right, any quick earthquake questions? We're gonna do the whole what you do thing, but just about that map. Sometimes people get stuck on the map. Yeah?
Where can you find that map?
That map happens to be on the City of Berkeley, the OES website. So it's quite findable. I am also going to have my email address up at the end here. If you want me to email you this slideshow, I am happy to do so. It's also, that map is in the mitigation plan. If you want a map of every single thing in Berkeley that happens, the mitigation plan has it. It's also about 800 pages long. So we say that the 2 people who have read it are Sarah Lana, who wrote it, and the state person who approved it. And that's probably it. I've read every single page and every single footnote. I've read most of it. But that plan has every single hazard in Berkeley with all sorts of cool overlays of maps. And one of the things I'm doing with that website rewrite is trying to make it a little more accessible and get those maps up a little bit. We're just not there quite yet, but we're working on it. That's another thing we're doing. Yes?
So my house is actually on the red line.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a really good question. You're on the red line. Oh no. Okay, so the red line is the fault zone. Now, despite, again, what movie, I'm not sure San Andreas did this. I've seen the trailers, I haven't watched the movie. A lot of earthquake movies, I believe 10.5 definitely did the ground splits in 2 and full houses get swallowed whole by the earthquake. No, that's not how earthquakes work. The whole point of earthquakes is friction. And so ground opening doesn't actually work in earthquakes because they're about friction. Now you can get ground cracks, right, where one side goes up and one side goes down, or it's not next to each other. You can actually find curbs in the city of Hayward that slowly are creeping apart from each other because of where the fault is. But opening and getting swallowed is not something you need to worry about. So I've at least got that for you. There are some earthquake areas in the country that have sinkholes. We're not one of them. Okay, for earthquakes, to be specific. But being on that fault zone means that you're gonna get some really significant shaking, right? If we've got an earthquake here, really significant shaking. What you won't have is shaking that's as long as it will be in a liquefaction zone. The liquefaction zone shaking will last a lot longer because it will basically bounce back and forth and keep going. It'll be really intense, but it won't necessarily last that long. So there's some things you can do house-wise, and I will happily share the website for all of that kind of things. There's actually a lot of tax rebate programs that the city of Berkeley has to help make it a little cheaper to fix some of your house stuff. I am not an expert, which is why I refer to the website on that. Do not ask me how to keep your house up. I'm just happy, I can tell you what to do in the house to keep you going. And that's my goal here. So I hope that sort of addresses some of it. Okay, yes, one more, and then I'm gonna go for it.
What's the URL for that site?
So you can find that map directly if you do cityofberkeley.info/mitigation. That's probably the safest one now. It's gonna be, I'd say in about 4 weeks, it'll be cityofberkeley.info/earthquake, but I'm not there yet. I'm working on it. I'm going as fast as I can. I have to get the flyers done before the fair. So that's my first priority. Then I can fix the website after that. All right, but let's not get stuck on earthquake. So that's not the only thing we've got here. We've also got wildfire. The reason I picked this picture out of the many, many, many Oakland Hills wildfire pictures is because what the people are doing. These are people who are able to run out, right? These are people who are on their feet and running out. And we know that the Oakland Hills fire and the tunnel fire, whatever we're calling it in this particular iteration, a lot of people were driving out and they got stuck in their cars and they had to get out on foot. And for some people, that's going to be extraordinarily challenging. And we're going to actually talk about something from the Valley Fire, which was remarkably similar in how this fire spread in a second. So wildfire is a very real threat here in Berkeley, and one that as we drill and practice for it, the more I learn, the clearer it is to me that if you feel in this city like there is any possibility there might be a wildfire in the hills, why don't you go have some coffee down at Pete's? Go down to the original, just get out of the hills as quickly as possible, because what we're gonna need people to do, we will start shouting as loud as we can, but we're not gonna be able to shout at everybody. And we're gonna need people to leave on their own as quickly as they can if we've got a wildfire threat here in Berkeley. All right, and then last, if you saw this picture on Berkeley side, it was mine. We went on an adventure. This is actually not from the El Nino. We did not flood the Ashby underpasses here, which is sort of impressive. We're all a little shocked that it didn't happen. This is from 2 years ago. That one really big rainstorm we got in 2014 in December. This is from that. There are at least 3 cars in there. No one agrees quite how many there are. There's quite a debate amongst the various response officials. And at least 2 people drove straight in and had to swim out of their cars. Just drove straight around the barriers and into the water. Don't recommend it. So we get flooding. We get some localized flooding. We get power outages. Power outages are big. They actually, if they go on for more than a few days, those have a long-term effect on how your life is going. We also have man-made problems as a potential here in Berkeley. So we've got trucks on the freeways, we've got trains on the train tracks that have things can go wrong. We know that. And so when we're talking about Berkeley disaster, it's important to think of the worst case scenario, right? But it's also important to think of all the middle case scenarios, because those might be a little approachable, and what you learn from preparing for those might help you in that big worst case one. So if you ever find yourself getting totally overwhelmed by the big red line through the earthquake map, take a step back and think, okay, if my power is out for 2 days, what am I gonna need for that? And just start there. That prep will get you ready for other situations. So just starting with that. All right, so how can these hazards change with aging? First of all, it's going to vary by the person. So each person is gonna have a slightly different thing. So I'm gonna talk about some general trends here and let you take what is useful to you and leave behind what isn't. So first one is evacuation. I'm not sure how many of you heard the story of this woman. And so I'm gonna share it because I think it's actually really illustrative of the kinds of things that happen. And also I wanna be clear, I don't think anyone was wrong here. I think it was a lot of tragic things happening in a row very quickly. So, Barbara McWilliams' last words to her caretaker, who phoned her Saturday during the first hours of the Valley Fire, were to say that she was fine at home and was confident someone would come by if she needed to leave. A neighbor offered to bring her with him to Middletown, but McWilliams declined, according to Hitson, who is her caretaker. The sheriff's office received the first phone call about her at 7:12 p.m. on Saturday. The caller asked authorities to help a disabled elderly woman. Deputies and officers responded to the area at 7:29 p.m., but were unable to reach the subdivision because it was already engulfed in flames, according to Brooks. So, it's just an awful story. And this is the first woman that they knew had died in this wildfire. And so I read that and my heart just broke. This is the situation I want to do everything I can in my power to keep from happening. But first of all, it's really hard. We don't know. This area in particular, my boss had been up there for a wildfire in that area 3 weeks before. They see a lot of wildfires, and they assume this one's gonna be like the last one. It's not gonna be that big. That assumption is deadly in wildfires. And it's deadly in hurricanes too, but luckily we don't have to deal with it. Especially for something, an evacuation is a pain, but if it turns out to be nothing, you get to go home in a few hours. So getting out is generally a good thing to do far sooner than later. The other thing that's here, the thing that really breaks my heart, is the thing I want to happen happened. A neighbor knocked on her door and said, "We're evacuating, I think you should go too." And she said no. So I'm not gonna say this about this specific situation because I don't know all the dynamics happening, right? In her neighborhood or in her life. But the only thing I can encourage in this is, so I don't know that this happened here, but what we can do is make sure that's not the first time you've knocked on that neighbor's door, right? That you have a sense of trust and that you have a sense of knowledge and that each of you knows that the other person is there, right? So that's key thing number one. And then key thing number two is remembering to knock on that neighbor's door because I'm so grateful that that at least happened. It's gotta be a little bit of comfort that they tried, right? And so what we ask everyone, what we've actually started teaching our firefighters and police officers is when they knock on someone's door and tell them to evacuate, ask if there's a neighbor who's gonna need more help and remind people to check on their neighbors. We're actually telling our firefighters to say that. We're putting it in all of our messages. We want everyone to reach out to those around them because that's our best chance. It might just be that on that day, you tripped and fell and have a sprained ankle and it's gonna be hard for you to get out. It can be any number of circumstances, but the more we can check on each other in this, the better off we're gonna be. So, and the last thing that's sort of important about this story is we can't rely on our first responders to be able to get to every single person and get them out. They actually had an incredible response time here. That 7 minutes is fast. I'm astonished because that was right in the middle of this fire blazing at a huge degree and that we were able to see the neighborhood. So we need people to take, especially in something like a wildfire evacuation, as much action as they can to get themselves out and not to wait for the knock on the door. That if they start seeing some embers in the air to say, does not feel safe and I'm gonna get out. And to not block streets as they do it. So if for some reason you have to leave a car, don't block the street. Okay, so that's evacuation thing number one that can get a little different. Because needing a ride to get out of the hills, those hills are steep. I sometimes feel like I need to give my own car a ride when I'm driving up there, give it a little push to get up some of those hills. And so thinking about what kind of plan you might need to get out, what your best routes are gonna be. Is there a walking path that is pretty good that you would be able to get out? Or is there really not? And you're definitely gonna need a ride. Make sure your neighbors know that. So thinking about that kind of plan. All right, next thing. Not sure if anyone's ever seen one of these before. This is a shaker fire alarm. Here's the reason I'm bringing it up. And this is true for everybody from the time that we are very young to as we age, we start losing certain frequencies in our hearing. It's actually was a big thing in my high school when people were just starting to get cell phones. You could program your cell phone to be of a frequency that your teachers couldn't hear. Because even a 15-year age difference was enough that they had lost some of that higher registry. Okay, so this is like, I've already lost it. I already can't hear that ringtone either. So as we age, some parts of our hearing are not as useful as they used to be. And that can include fire alarms. There's more than one reason that we tell you to test your fire alarms. One of them is to make sure everyone can still hear it. And by the way, this is also true of those kids. I've definitely heard of like 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds who do not wake up when they hear the fire alarm. They just are able to sleep through it like nobody's business. Or you might know people who can do that anyway. This is another option. So this is a fire alarm that has a little cord going under it into the pillow. okay? And it shakes the pillow when it goes off. It's also got a carbon monoxide detector in there. You can even use it for both a day-to-day alarm clock and a fire alarm. It'll say fire when it's going off because of that.
And it's called a shaker?
Yeah, if you just search fire alarm low hearing, you will find these. There's many, many, many different people who produce them. You purposefully can't see the brand name up here because it doesn't really matter. This is a very common device. They're out there and they might be great. So thing number one to think about here, can you hear the alarms? Really, really important, because really sometimes people will have difficulty hearing them. And thing number two, will you wake up to them? If you won't wake up, this might still be a good option even if you can hear them. Because it's the number of fire deaths that happen when someone is asleep are much higher because smoke does not wake you up. Smoke makes you pass out before it makes you wake up. So the smell of smoke is not something that's going to alert you. And that's why we need fire alarms. That's why they're so important. Okay, so back to earthquake a little bit. We did a few other things. I work for the fire department, so I have to do some fire stuff. It's basically contractually obliged. This is a scenario, so it's not a real earthquake, but it's USGS's best guess for what a 7.2 earthquake on the Hayward Fault would look like. Is everyone oriented? It's sort of a weird way. We've got the ocean down at the bottom of the slide and then the bay when we're sort of reasonably close to across from where the Golden Gate Bridge, where the opening is. So just put yourself where we are here.
Where's the epicenter?
You're gonna see it, I promise. Give me a second. Once I keep losing my mouse, which is inconvenient. Oh, there it is. Okay, got it. Yeah, you found it. So this is a 7.2. We're 10 seconds into the earthquake. This is along the Hayward Fault. 20 seconds into the earthquake, Santa Cruz just woke up. And let's see how long it goes. Now, some things to look at here. Did you see how there was that little blue wave before there was the really big shaking wave?
Yeah.
Have you heard of earthquake early warning? That's how that works. That blue wave is why your dog was barking for 10 seconds before you felt the shaking start. They're much better at sensing those waves than humans are. And our alerting systems can actually send out the information before the heavy shaking happens. It's P waves versus S waves. For those of you who are geologically inclined. But that's what's going on there. And it means you're not crazy if you thought your dog noticed the earthquake before. Although if you're talking about the day before, not so much. Couple seconds, I'll give you that. I had a lovely coworker when I was at the Disaster Research Center, which was in Delaware, to be clear. They're not used to earthquakes. They had the Virginia earthquake there. She was insisting to me, my goldfish knew. They were acting so weird that morning. No, they did not. I'm sorry. I'm sure they're wonderful goldfish. They did not know the earthquake was coming. All right, so some things to notice here. The time of shaking here, 74.9 seconds. That's a whole lot of shaking. And that shaking is not necessarily going to stop in some of those liquefaction areas. You can actually see the island of Alameda and why they are a full liquefaction area. They've got this sort of like burst of red that happens there that doesn't happen quite as far out everywhere else. And most of that shaking is actually in the hills, but we're still going to have significant shaking. So this is just sort of our context. Big earthquake. Another good useful thing about this particular graphic is we talk about epicenters a lot and think the damage is going to be worse right there where that is. That's not how big earthquakes work. The fault cracks, so it's all along the fault where it's bad. And so just because we're not right next to the epicenter doesn't mean that we're not going to have really significant shaking. It's traveling. It's why the Northridge earthquake had huge damage in Santa Monica, right? And why the Loma Prieta earthquake had big damage in Oakland, because of how these earthquakes travel. Yes?
What about depth?
Depth. Depth matters. Shallower earthquakes have more shaking that you can feel. There's a lot of things. My sort of party trick of guessing how big an earthquake is counting the seconds out loud. Out loud helps you not speed up as much once the shaking starts. So for the Napa earthquake, I was sort of in my head going 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. And when I got to 9 and it was still shaking, I knew it's bad somewhere. It's not bad here. Nothing fell off my shelves. But if it's lasting that long, if the shaking lasts that long, it means that somewhere else it's far more intense. So that's a sort of, so if it's like one tiny little jolt, it's probably not a bad earthquake anywhere. But if it keeps going, even if it's just low level shaking, somewhere it's probably not good. Yes? That's the Hayward fault. Yeah, and this is a simulation, as I said, not a real earthquake. USGS wants me to say that about 5 times when I show this video. All right, so you might have seen that very top image a lot. Well, we've made it a bit bigger for very important reasons. Drop, cover, and hold on is still the law of the land. It's definitely what we want people to do. It's definitely how we want people to react. However, it's not going to be the best option for everyone. Here's my general rule. If you can get under a table and get up again on your own, drop, cover, and hold on is great. If when you get under a table, you're not able to get yourself back up again, it is not a good option for you, okay? So for whatever reason it is that you're not going to be able to get up again, drop, cover, and hold on. The last thing we want is a bunch of people stuck under tables. That is going to be a really silly rescue effort when the firefighter comes. Oh, I just need to get out from under the table. Okay, well, I'm glad I could rescue you. Check. So what should we do instead? First of all, stealing a chair. I've always got to have a chair for this demo. All of you who are in here, I don't want any of you running towards doorways when our earthquake happens, our fake earthquake. What the best option is, you're in a chair. It's great. Duck, cover, and hold on right smack dab there in your chair. Cover your head and neck. The whole point of drop, cover, and hold on is to keep things from falling on you and to keep you from moving. You'll notice the first thing is drop. The real reason for that is because people really like to run during earthquakes. I've watched videos from all across the world, Nepal, Japan, everyone runs. It's just a human instinct. I know during Napa, I felt the weirdest instinct to run. And I was just sitting in bed going, I know better than this. Why am I feeling that? It's just sort of our human panic, it's our fight or flight reflex. Something's scaring us, we want to run away from it. Still shaking outside, we know that, but we still want to run away from it. And so that's why the drop or lock, as you'll see in these, stays the same every time. Don't try to get somewhere else. Okay, if you're in the canned food aisle, take a few more steps. Okay, but in general, don't try to get somewhere else. Now, so if you can get in a chair, or if you're on a couch, and you've got a glass table in front of you, great. Take a pillow from your couch, put it over your head, wait out the shaking. If you use a walker, or if you have a loved one who does, lock the wheels so it's not moving on its own, and cover and hold on in the walker. If you use a wheelchair, lock the wheels, cover and hold on right there. So there's a lot of options. The big thing is don't try to go anywhere else, because the ground is going to be moving a lot. And going somewhere else is a way a lot of people get hurt. Try to keep things from falling on you. That's the main way people get hurt. Anyone know the one woman who died in the Napa earthquake? What killed her? A TV falling on her head. Okay? That's really what does it. That's really what hurts people, is things inside our buildings. Now, if you're in a building that's horribly compromised, bad things can happen. I'm not going to say that, but the vast majority of our injuries here in California are from things falling on people and our deaths. And then hold on is because things are going to move and you want to move with them. So if you're in a chair, you need to hold on to that chair because it's going to be skittering across the floor and you're going to want to skitter with it as it shakes. All right, what should you do if it's the middle of the night? Stay in bed is the best answer. And here's the thing. I'm a volunteer with the Red Cross in my off time because I can't get enough of this stuff, clearly. It's actually true. That's the sad thing. There's somebody who teaches with me in this room, and he's now laughing at me. With the Red Cross, I actually help them with social media accounts. And I was running the Napa Red Cross social media account after the earthquake. The most favorited, retweeted, liked tweet was before you go to bed tonight, make sure your bed is a safe place to stay if there's an aftershock. Because that's something people can do. This requires no money. It just requires moving some things, right? Looking at your bed critically, going, okay, maybe I don't need that picture frame right on top of my head. I can shift that one over. That's not a great place for it. Or, okay, I'm next to a window. Well, the bed sort of has to be there, but if I close the shades at night, then if the window happens to break, the glass isn't going to fall on me. Really simple steps. So if you're in bed, first of all, make it a safe place. Then stay in bed, use a pillow, cover your head, wait it out, wait till the shaking's done. And then I know back here by the lovely welcome sign, we have an excellent demo of an under the bed kit, right? With your good pair of shoes, with a flashlight, with a pair of glasses if you use them. I know I do. I've got contacts on now, but I have a lot of difficulty seeing in dark situations at night. I learned that the hard way. And so have some of those supplies, a pair of gloves, whatever it makes the most sense for you under your bed, so when you are moving, when the shaking has stopped, you're safe. Because here's this number 2 set of injuries. Cut up feet, cut up hands, right? That's what comes next. So if you weren't injured in the shaking, you might get injured moving around after. In the Napa earthquake, there were actually 2 waves of injuries. One were the people who were hurt in the earthquake. One came around 10 a.m. that next day of everybody trying to clean up and doing it badly. Okay, so think about that now. Think about that ahead of time. All right, so I was asked, yes, sir.
What if you're in a big open area?
Great question. If you are at the prep fair in Civic Center Park, no, we're happy. That's great. Stay where you are. Take a seat if you can. Just, steady yourself if you can't take a seat. It might actually be hard to stand. Stay outside. The worst place to be in an earthquake is going from inside to outside. Because there's so many things on the sides of our buildings. Flower pots and tiles and bricks and things like that, that's the most dangerous place to be, which is why if you're inside, you want to stay inside. And if you're outside, you want to stay outside and get away from buildings. So if you're right next to, say, Old City Hall, and this is not news to anyone, Old City Hall is not a seismically safe building. It's why they just stopped holding the council meetings there. So very public record. I would step a few steps away from Old City Hall. I wouldn't want to be right next to that building. So getting across the street from it. What they say generally, and this is clearly instructions for people who do not live in the actual cities of California, but technically what I'm supposed to say is twice the height of the building away from the building. If you can do that anywhere in Berkeley, I'm really impressed. It's just our buildings are big and our open spaces are not. Maybe in San Pablo Park, you can probably manage it over there. But in general, getting away from buildings and just waiting it out and not being under power lines. Power lines are no good. Yeah, that's what, there's so many things on the facades of buildings that you really want to avoid. So what we just heard is that in the Macy's building, some glass fell and people got injured by that glass from the outside of the building. So away from buildings or inside buildings, don't go throughout the door. There is a horrifically wonderful video from the horrifically awful reality TV show, The Real World, in which there was an earthquake in Southern California while the TV cameras were rolling. They're outside by the pool, sunbathing, as one does in the middle of a weekday. And luckily, to be clear, it was like a 4.3, 4.4 earthquake, not a very big one. They startle up. That was an earthquake. Oh my goodness. They run through the sliding glass doors. Hey guys, there's an earthquake. You should all come outside right now. They run back outside. No, please don't. If we've learned nothing, it's not to listen to what the real world actors do during earthquakes. But in general, that's the biggest place to avoid. So thank you. If you're in Nepal or a country, the buildings aren't built the same way they are here. So what should you do for those kinds of buildings? Here's thing number 1. The rules change in different countries based on their building codes. So the rules I'm telling you here about drop, cover, and hold on generally are good rules for in places with strong buildings. So if you're in places like Chile, most of New Zealand's pretty good. Japan is in really good shape. The US, with strong building codes for earthquakes, that's what we want you to do. However, if you're in countries without as strong of building codes, you're gonna have to make some judgment calls while the shaking's happening. And I think the best advice I can give is to be really aware. And if you see things that make you think the building's gonna fail, trying to get out might be the best option. But I can't, the problem is it's not an easy scenario. And so keeping your eyes open and looking for how to adjust as best you can is really the best I can offer there. The question was, there's a lot of chemicals on the UC Berkeley campus. Are they working on that? First of all, yes, they are aware that earthquakes happen here. They're very aware in their labs in particular, and up at the Berkeley lab. We actually meet with the lab and with the UC Berkeley Emergency Management Office every month to make sure we're all on the same page and we know what each other's plans are. So they actually do have a lot of earthquake protections ready to go. They're not that worried about their labs because their labs are really well designed in order to be safe for those chemicals. They're more worried about their animals and making sure, and the experiments that need electricity. That's what they're sort of, if you see what they freak out about for the next 24 hours, other than making sure that their people are okay, which is of course their first priority as an institution, it's keeping some of the research going that they're really concerned about. So I can tell you about that. So the question was, they used to say door jam. And by the way, yes, they absolutely used to tell you door jam. You are not crazy for remembering some official in a shirt like mine 20 years ago saying door jam. That was absolutely a thing to go under the doorway. I'm going to tell you why they say it, and then it's going to become really clear why it's not still true. So 1906 earthquake happens. There's actually not a lot they can study from that earthquake to figure out what happened because it all burned down right after, right? So they don't necessarily get a lot of useful research of what you should do during an earthquake out of the 1906 earthquake. So then there's an earthquake down in South America. I said, oh good, let's go study that one. Didn't burn there. They go down, they find these old adobe buildings, and the only thing that's still standing is the doorway. Brilliant! Doorways are the safest places to be during an earthquake. We've got it. So the problem is, if you are in a pre-1930s adobe building that has not been retrofitted in any way, shape, or form, go ahead and go for the doorway. If you are not, the way that buildings are built here in the United States, and generally, is not a doorway strong building. It's not built so the entire structure of the building is supported by the doorway. And so it's not a safer place necessarily than any other part of the building. Now, the other reason, there's some nice things about doorways. There's generally nothing that's going to fall on you in a doorway, so it feels sort of good. The big other problems with doorways is, first of all, only 1 or 2 people fit in a doorway. There's a lot of us in this room, we're not going to all make it to a doorway. Number 2 is that doorways have doors in them. This sounds like a silly problem. But if you're really worried and you're all braced up in the doorway and you're just thinking about this earthquake, you're not going to notice that door. And we had a lovely demonstration in the back that comes slamming into your nose and into your fingers. They actually found from Loma Prieta and Northridge a huge number of people with broken noses, fingers, and toes from standing in doorways. That's not how you want to start off your earthquake recovery, right? And so that's why our big priorities are keeping things from falling on you and finding a safe place to wait it out until the earthquake's done. If there is no place, if you are in a room with nothing else to protect you but walls, an interior wall is better than an exterior wall. That's all you got. Covering and holding next to an interior wall is better, mainly because there aren't any windows in interior walls, so that's a better place to be. If you're getting closer, however, to the question of the triangle of life theory, which might be some part of this, that is complete bunk. I think that's an okay word to use. It's this idea that you should be next to something really big in an earthquake, and then when the ceiling inevitably falls, it will fall on the big thing and not on you. First of all, we know the ceiling is not, the building's not inevitably going to collapse in the US. That's just not the way. There will be some, and it will be tragic. But most of our buildings, that's not going to be our main problem. It's not how most people will get hurt or killed. Secondly, that really big, tall thing is very likely going to fall. And it might fall on you while you are next to it, trying to do drop, cover, and hold on. So just if you've seen that go around, it's one of those things, there aren't many things that your people still forward to you via email. This one, for some reason, people really like still forwarding. It's still out there. Everything the government tells you is wrong. It actually says in the email, if you drop, cover, and hold on, every time you will die. I've done it in a real earthquake, and I'm still here. So I'm feeling pretty good about my strategy. And I can go point by point through that one. It's a little interesting. My favorite piece of advice I give. Okay, many of you are drivers in the lovely Bay Area. Picture this scene. It recommends every time there's an earthquake and you're in your car, the best thing to do is pull over by the side of the road, get out of your car, and lay down next to your car. I'm not sure how much you guys trust the other drivers in the Bay Area, but I do not trust them that much. So that's sort of if people read all the way down to that point, they start going, wait a second, there might be something wrong here, because it starts very logically and then it gets a little funky. But it's just one of those things. So, and I am happy to point out resources if you need to give like every citation, because there's somebody who keeps sending it to you. I've got like a link that literally has all the citations of why it's wrong with research papers attached to each one. So we've got that out there. Okay. Let's move on, because I can get stuck. Let's talk about this slide. This slide was requested that we talk about what exactly are you going to be doing, first of all, right after an earthquake, in the next 12 hours, and then in the next few days. So the right after checkup is check on your loved ones and pets for injuries. I think we've all sort of got that one down. I know during the Northridge earthquake, which I lived through, my father had to hold my mother down to keep her from getting to her babies while it was still shaking. Because they had a big mirror that fell off the wall and broke at the end of their bed. They didn't have me around to tell them what to do yet. I was only 7, so I couldn't quite get them to correct the error of their ways. So check on your loved ones, we all know that. Check on your location for dangerous situations. Some things you want to look for under the sink. Make sure, if you're thinking chemicals in the UC Berkeley, you've got a whole lot of chemicals sitting under your sink. In one of the cheapest ways I can offer to make yourself more prepared for a disaster, you know those super cheap plastic baskets that they sell? Stuff they're sort of half size. Stuff all your bottles in one of those nice and tightly. It's not going to tip over in an earthquake. There you go, you've solved a problem. Really easy under your sink, and you're a little more organized, which is always a nice thing to aim for under your sink. I know mine is usually not that clean. So you're looking for dangerous situations like that. You're smelling for gas, you're looking for smoke, you're looking for really big cracks in your house, things that make you feel unsafe. You're also listening for that fire alarm. Fire alarms go off after earthquakes, we still listen to them, because we don't know if it's just the dust that kicked something up or if there's a real fire, and we'd rather wait it out instead of take a chance. That's sort of one of our themes here. We consider turning off utilities. So you don't have to turn off the gas after every earthquake. I'm pretty sure you've had Les Putnam in here from PG&E to talk about this before. But you only need to turn off gas if you have a reason to suspect there's something wrong with your gas system. So if your nice gas stove is disconnected from the wall and there's a pipe sticking out, that's a good reason to suspect there's something wrong with your gas system and you should turn off your gas. Or if you're smelling it, or if you're seeing a lot of smoke, it's probably a good idea to turn it off no matter what. And in that process, by the way, once you smell that gas, no lighting matches. It sounds really stupid, but it's true. Open all the doors, leave them open as you're leaving, and turn off the gas. Okay. Evacuate if necessary. If the alarms are going off, evacuate. Something I have to tell people a lot in apartment buildings. If the alarms are going off, you always evacuate. Don't necessarily run out into the street. A lot of people are going to be confused. And first of all, drivers, who's driven during an earthquake? I actually have. Anyone driven during an earthquake? How many of those of you who have driven felt the earthquake while you were driving? Nope. Most drivers, unless it's a really big earthquake, are not going to sense the earthquake. They might think, my tire's acting funny. I should probably check that at my next stop. But they're not actually going to feel it. And so running out into the street, whether it's 3 a.m. or 3 p.m., people aren't necessarily going to notice. And so being careful still about your personal safety and making sure you're in a safe place. Good point. And then next thing is try to get out, if at all possible, a very quick and very short, I'm okay, I made it through the earthquake message. So we call it a safe and well message. That's what the Red Cross, they actually have a whole system for this. But what that can be is as simple as a text message to the person who's your emergency contact saying, there is an earthquake, I'm okay. The reason I recommend text messages is because they're a tiny bit of data that just for a second needs to get out. Unlike a phone call where you have to have a sustained connection to be able to hear voices, a text message is quick and effective. If you are sitting in here and you are like my grandmother, who is awesome and does all sorts of wonderful things, but does not like text messages. She sort of hates the fact that she has a cell phone in the first place. That's okay. This is where the neighborhood kid comes in really useful. Bribe them with a candy bar. Will you send a text to that contact saying I'm okay? All right, we're good, right? They'll know how to use your phone, I promise you. It doesn't matter what phone it is, they'll figure it out. You might want to check the charges on your bill next time, but still, they'll know how to use your phone. Okay, so text messages, #1 way to communicate, but don't jam the system. Don't try to make phone calls unless you've got a life-threatening emergency. And please, 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 do not call 911 to ask if it was an earthquake. This may sound silly to you. I have been in the 911 dispatch center when the power goes out. The number of people who call 911 to ask if the power's out is remarkable, okay? So these things, don't call for that. But if you're stuck in an elevator because the power is out and you're gonna need some help, go ahead and call 911. So if you've got a life-threatening reason, call. Know it might take a while to get through, right? So, but that's what we want to save the phone lines for that. Yeah. So little secret, our cell phone towers have no seismic regulations for having to be able to stay up. They also have internet news sources for any disaster other than an earthquake, and even in an earthquake is going to be helpful pretty quickly. I mentioned I have a friend who works for Cisco. His job every single day is reestablishing internet in disaster-torn areas. He has gone to Nepal, he has gone to the Philippines. He has had phones working again in 3 days in most of those places. We are going to be able to look up something on our phone before we're going to be able to turn on our faucet. Here, I can guarantee that. That's definitely going to be true. So those are going to work probably before we can even turn on a power switch. Our phone systems, the network will be back up because they can bring in